So we're going to go over the timeline of the day, and then we'll go through what we are going to be asking for on the day, and we're going to give you all the information and plenty of time to ask questions. So for if folks are coming from the Portland metro area, we do have a bus coming down. That bus is going to depart Portland, one stop at 8 o'clock and one stop at 8:30. And that will have everybody arriving into Salem around 9:30, 9:45. For everybody else coming from other places, we're going to open the doors to the church at 9:30. So that will be when registration opens. And we're going to start the training at 10. There will be coffee and some late breakfast snacks between 9:30 and 10. So if you want to get there early, you can. Just so you all know, you cannot park in the church parking lot. You need to park on the street, unfortunately. There are meters. They do accept credit cards and debit cards, but we cannot park in the church parking lot. So once folks come in to the church, they're going to be greeted by several of our neighborhood partnerships staff. And people will be asked for their name, and they will be given a packet of information for them to keep that day, plus a list of where they're going to be that day, as well as a few other last-minute pieces of information. And then they'll be told where the coffee and the snacks are, and they'll be told where the training is. The church is accessible. There's a ramp up to the doorway, there's an elevator, and we're going to be in the sanctuary, which is right there on the first floor. If for all of you team leaders, you're going to have a little star next to your name when you register, and you'll be told to come see either Janet or I, and we will have some additional information for you. And we're going to go through the packet in a few minutes, but we're going to give you packets that you're going to manage for your legislators, as well as who's on your team and some other background information about legislators. And we'll go through it in a minute as well, but we're also going to give you a cheat sheet, which has all the latest information, so it's written down and you don't have to memorize it. Once we go into the training, what we're going to do is we're going to have we'll have folks get up and talk about why it's so important that everybody's there today. We're going to talk through everything that we're asking legislators for. We're going to talk through what it will look like for you to talk to your legislator. We're going to do a little role play. And then we will also talk about what we want people to share with their legislators. I think we're going to say this a lot of times between now and a week from now, but the most important thing that people can be sharing with their legislator is their story and their experience, either with housing instability or affordable housing or IDAs, and what that has given them. We don't want people to worry about the details of the bills. That's not why we want you in the Capitol. We want you to share with your legislators why this work is so important and why we need them to vote yes, by sharing those stories of the impact of affordable housing and of IDAs in our communities. So really, I'm going to say this many times, but please don't worry about all the details about where the bills are and what's in the bills. We really want to be focused on building champions and getting people to vote yes and be strong, passionate advocates for these, because they understand how important it is. At the end of the training in the morning at about 11 o'clock, what we're going to do is at registration, when you come and get packets from Janet or I, we're also going to give you a yellow card that's going to have your team name on it. And we've tried to make them fun. We've named them after fun places to visit in Oregon. And we're going to have all of the team leaders stand up. And you'll hold up your card. It will be a little bit of mass chaos, but what is Lobby Day if not organized chaos? And then we're going to have you all go downstairs, and we'll have you put your team name on a table. And everybody will know what the team name is. They won't obviously know who you are necessarily. Some of them might be your coworkers or savers that you brought with them, or residents that you brought with you. But for folks who don't know you, you just want to make sure that your card is visible, and we'll help be there to kind of manage the madness and get people where they need to be. Once it's there, then it's your turn to kind of take over. And I think what we're going to ask you to do is have everybody introduce themselves in the team, and then really think about who wants to share what piece of the story with the legislators that you are going to visit. So you are going to want to have folks who are sharing maybe their personal story. Maybe there's somebody there who's a client or a resident who has an amazing story about access to affordable housing or access to IDAs that you're going to want them to share. Maybe it illustrates the point. Maybe you have somebody who is really good at a statistic or data point about need in their community that you want them to share. Maybe you'll have somebody that wants to be the person that makes the ask. You probably will have people that aren't yet feeling comfortable. They might not want to share yet. This time is really to help you prepare your team so that you can go into the meetings and know who's going to say what in that time. As team leaders, you should feel free to be directive. Your whole visit is only going to be 15 minutes. And so we will have coached people in the morning about how they need to be concise about their story. We use the same, and we're going to go over what we ask people to share. We try to help people think about what are the 3 most important things from their story that they need to share, and really try to help them be concise. As team leaders, you're also going to want to help reiterate that. And that will kind of help you figure out the structure for the meeting and who's going to say what. This is also the time where you will have lots of neighborhood partnership staff, Carlos, myself, Janet, and others who are wandering around the room. And if you need help at this point in time in helping your team really figure out a concise way to share what you need to with your legislators, we are there to help you. So if you need somebody to come over and say, that's a really amazing story, what if you said these 3 things? Or that's really great, but that's a really long story. Maybe you should write it down so that the legislator gets to read it later, so that you can just say 5 words about it. Or if you have somebody that is getting a little bit off track, this is where we can really help you. So feel free to flag us down. We will be wandering around. We'll be making eye contact with all of you to see how you're doing and how the team's going. We may just stop by and check in. So if somebody is not on message to, this is a place where you can say, that's a really great question, but what we're here to talk about today is, and feel free to be directive. And if you need somebody to be directive for you, one of us will gladly do that. And you can pull us aside and tell us what you need. At some point in there, we will break for lunch and have everybody go pick up their lunch and then come back into their teams. And so that's another place where you can pull one of us aside and say, hey, I have a team member that's a little off track. Can you help me get them back on track? Most of the time, you all are going to be, you don't need our help. Most everybody's going to be super great, but every once in a while, there's one team member that likes to talk that is going to spiral off, and we are here to help you. And if we need to take them aside and talk to them, we totally will. We want this to be a good experience for everybody. So once we finish that part, what we're going to do is we're all going to walk over to the Capitol together. For folks with mobility issues, the bus will drive us over to the Capitol. We're going to do a big photo in the rotunda, and then you and your team are going to be together for a couple hours for meetings. You're going to have hopefully 3 meetings, 1 senator and 2 representatives, and hopefully that there will be constituents for every legislator in your group. The meetings will be scattered between 12:30 and 4, and you'll have the times already laid out on the agenda that we give you when you show up that morning. It is possible that some of the meeting times will change. Hopefully they change in the morning while we're still all together in one place. But we will figure out how to let you know, and we'll manage that on our end. You may be meeting with staff, or you may be meeting with a legislator. Either one is totally and completely fine. Staff are amazing. They know what they need to tell their boss. And if you need to meet with staff, that's totally fine. Things happen. The Capitol is really busy right now, and so a legislator may be stuck in a meeting or in committee, or something may have come up. So, and we'll go over that morning. Hopefully nobody's disappointed, but it will be okay. Once you're in the meeting, your job as team leaders, you're going to have the packet of information to give to legislators. And then your job is to kind of manage the meeting, right? So you're going to have everybody introduce themselves. And then maybe you've decided that Joanne has the perfect story. And so maybe your job is to say, Joanne, do you want to share with Senator Carlos what is happening in your community? And that will prompt them to tell their story. Every meeting is going to go differently. Some legislators and staff are going to sit and listen while everybody talks. Some legislators are going to start asking questions early on in the meeting. Sometimes legislators are going to want to talk about what's on their mind. And as best as you can manage that, it's going to be fine. You're just going to have to kind of go with the flow a little bit, and it will be okay. If you have a legislator that does not agree with us, which I will say we will try to give you a heads up on, it's very rare. You can just say thank you so much and move on. There's going to be several things that we're going to be talking about, housing and IDAs. So if they don't agree with us on housing or homelessness issues, you can flip to IDAs. If it starts to go poorly, if the legislator is having a bad day, you can end the meeting early. You can say thank you so much for your time today and have the group leave. That is totally fine. We want everybody to have a good experience. I would say once every probably 3 years, we have a legislator that's in a really bad mood and is grumpy, and it happens. We want you to come tell us when that happens, because I will go tattle on them 100%. Because they're supposed to be nice to constituents, and also it's an election year, so they really should be nice to their constituents. But if the meeting gets off track, you should feel free to say thank you very much for your time today and leave. That's okay. We don't want people to have a bad experience. We don't want people to be on the receiving end of a grumpy legislator. So if it's more appropriate to leave, that's totally fine. You will also have a visit report form. So if there is a question that you cannot answer, please just say, I don't know, and then write it down. And Janet and I will come back to the Capitol the next day, and we will spend our time answering those questions for legislators. So please don't feel like you need to know all the details, and definitely don't make anything up. That doesn't help either. Just write it down and we'll answer it, and it will be fine. I don't know is a totally acceptable answer. Every once in a while, there will be a legislator who will say, well, where should I get the money for this? It is not your job to answer that question. So the best answer that I can give to that question is to say, Senator so-and-so, my job here today is to tell you why this is so important to our community, and leave it at that. It is not our job to answer that question. It is their job to figure out where the money comes from. It is their job to make the tough decisions. We don't pay them very well for that, but it is their job. Before we go into what we're actually asking for and how people will be trained to tell their story, I'm just going to pause and see if there are any questions about any of that.
We do have a couple questions that came in via the chat feature. So one of the questions was, how big are the groups going to be? And I think Allison, maybe you can answer that one.
Yes, that's a great question. And it totally depends on where you are in the state and how many of your coworkers you're bringing. Guinevere and the folks from Eugene will remember that sometimes we have really amazing crowds of folks from Eugene, and sometimes those groups can be kind of big. Sometimes it can be 8 or 10 people. We try really hard to keep it to fewer than that. The ideal group size is like 4 or 5 folks. So that's what we're going to be shooting for, and we may take the time to try to reassign people a little bit, particularly for staff where your organization represents a large area. We may move you around just a little bit, and we'll tell you why we're doing that. But we'll try to keep it as slow as possible, or as small as possible, sorry, not as slow as possible.
Another question that came in was, will team leaders know who they're meeting with before the day of? That
is a great question. So the good news is we are pretty much at our capacity for registration. Normally with Lobby Day, we're closing registration 2 days before, which makes it really hard to tell people where they're going to be the day of. Generally, it is really safe to assume that you will be with your legislator, so the people that you vote for, and you can easily look that up by going to the legislative website. If it would make you feel better to know and to do research ahead of time, just send me an email. You can reply to the email that I sent out a few minutes ago before this training started and say, I really want to know, and I can email you on Wednesday when we're putting it all together. But we have a lot of jigsaw puzzling to do to make sure that the teams are balanced, that there's housing folks and IDA folks on all the teams, and that the teams aren't too big and things like that. So we tend to just tell you the morning of. I will say that we will promise to give you some information about the legislator's bio in your packet for you, team leaders. So you can share that with your group ahead of time so you'll know this person is on a key committee, this person is supportive, this person has been a champion for a decade, things like that. And we'll also tell you, like, these are the things that we really want to have you emphasize in the meeting.
Another question is, can we get the agenda ahead of time? So we can send you some of the information that has already been prepared that's going to be in the packets as an attachment if that is helpful for people.
It was also in the email that it was sent yesterday through Eventbrite. Hopefully folks got that. There was a lot of information about parking and food and what to wear. And there was a link to the lobby day training that Luke and Raina did, which was awesome. And as well as the agenda for the day and the 3 one-pagers that we're using for visitors. And so if you didn't get that, let me know, because we tried to send it. It was yesterday afternoon. None of us, we all unregistered ourselves for lobby day to free up more capacity. So none of us actually got the email because it only went to attendees. So if you didn't get it, let me know and it will get resent.
Allison, was that from Eventbrite? Is that what you said?
Yes, it was from Eventbrite. It was in the afternoon for sure.
Yeah, I don't think I got it, but I'll double check. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, would you let me know, Amy?
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, I was curious if you guys were going to offer, and my apologies, Allison, if I missed you say this, but I know it's handy to have some sort of one sheet or something with the legislators that we're talking to, just so we have an idea of who they are. I don't know if that's going to be provided or not.
We'll do it the morning of, but Frank, if you email me, I can let you know in advance. It will probably be Wednesday, though, until we're sure where you're going.
Thank you.
Yes. It looks like not everybody got the email from Eventbrite, so check your junk folders too, and then I will go in and resend it.
Yeah, just an update, Allison. This is Amy Hamilton. I did check everywhere, including junk and spam, and it's definitely not there.
Okay.
Sorry.
Oh, crap. Okay, it's fine. It happens. Thank you. We'll send another email. Thanks. Well, let's move into what we're going to ask for. So, Carlos, do you want to go first and talk about what we're asking for on IDAs?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thank you, and we appreciate you all for stepping up and agreeing to do this. So on the Oregon IDAs, as part of the introduction, again, we all know the Oregon Individual Development Account helps build and hope for Oregonians with low incomes by providing match savings, information about financial systems, the coaching that comes along with it, to be able to help build good saving and financial decision making for our savers. So again, we need action in 2020. We need the legislator to invest in our communities and keep the Oregon IDA strong. Like Allison mentioned, what we want you to tell legislators, again, this would come in the story section or the storytelling section, but the IDA initiative help build hope and strong financial futures for Oregon, to lead with some of these values, that the initiative is a proven and effective tool to be able to help low-income Oregonians save for a better future. And in the short session, the legislature needs to act to be able to protect and provide the funding needed, resulting from the federal changes that have led to our funding cut. So again, probably the most important pieces again, for the message to get across is, and why we're there, is to tell your legislators the impact that IDAs have on individuals, on families, on communities. If you remember nothing else, it's that impact message that we want to get across to legislators. And we'll have some leave behinds that you can leave that would talk about the technical pieces. And also you can tell folks that you're happy to have one of us, Janet, myself, follow up with them to get into the technical questions. I've been doing this for a long time, and I get my pieces mixed up with what we're asking on the IDA ask. Because it's a tax credit, because we're trying to eliminate that, we can get into the weeds really quickly, and it gets really complicated really quickly. I've been to a number of conversations with legislators, even legislators that are on the finance committee that get the tax credits. They get it mixed up in their head. So we're not asking you all to go into those details. Again, it's to stay high level and to talk about the impacts the IDAs have in your communities. We do want to, if you can, to prioritize the one-time funding ask that we're asking for. Again, we're asking for $4.5 million one-time funding from the general fund to be able to prevent cuts to the program and to the services to meet future savers and the needs that current savers have in our initiative. We want to convert the tax credit in the 10.1 million of general. We want to convert the tax credits to 10.1 million of general fund allocation. Again, this will be outlined in the one-pagers that we send everybody, or that's going to be included. You don't have to be an expert. We don't want you to be an expert, and we want you to keep continuing just to stay on message. As part of the message, or as part of the storytelling problem, we can and you can talk about the broader problem. So, there's a big issue in savings. 4 in 10 people in our country can't afford an unexpected expense. We know that far too many folks are struggling financially, and that the Oregon IDA is one of only a few tools that really help low-income individuals build a stronger financial future. So again, our issue is that we have a significant funding gap in our funding. So this is due to changes at the federal level that have led us facing an almost 40% funding cut for this year. So again, that's going to be the issue. And then our ask, just to summarize again, is we need the legislature to act in the short session, 4.5 million in one-time resources, and then we need our tax credits of 10.1 million to be converted into general fund allocation. We mentioned that we would, or that Allison would be emailing some additional pieces out for folks speaking on IDAs. I would like to follow up with some additional information that I think might be helpful if you're wanting to get into the weeds a little bit and have that additional information. Janet submit testimony for Senate Bill 1531, which just goes into the technicalities of the tax credit, and I think she did a really good job of explaining that. Again, we don't want you to go into that sort of detail in these meetings, but if it makes you feel better to be able to read that and have that information. And then we're also working on that one-page cheat sheet that'll have that information of where the numerous pieces on the IDA side are at and what our path forward is. So I'd like to get that to Allison to send out to everybody. Just if folks need that additional information, they will have that. And then I guess the last piece that I wanted to mention for those of you that came to our IDA lobby session last year, it was a little bit more than organized chaos. It was, and it will be less chaotic this year because we're having Allison's help and support and the team's support. So for everybody that came to our IDA lobby day last year, we were trying to get folks to go to more than 3 meetings, and for this year, it'll just be 3 meetings. So a senator and 2 representatives, and I think we're sticking with that for everybody. So it'll be a lot more clear, and it'll be a lot less chaotic than it was last year. So we're getting better at it every single year. And then the last piece for those folks is that if you did have an IDA t-shirt, the light blue one, bring that, because we have a couple more, but we're going to try to have everybody wear your IDA shirts for Lobby Day.
A few questions that came in. Anything that is being shared on the screen is from the packet that's going to be there for everybody the day of. So you will have that information in front of you. And another question is, will each group have someone who will talk about the IDA program, or are some teams not going to have, or is it up to the team leader to know about the IDA program if they're more of a housing person and vice versa? So do you want to touch on that question?
Allison, I think well, I'll let Allison answer, and then I'll add in if it's anything.
Sorry. We will absolutely make sure that if you need to talk to the legislator about either IDAs or housing, that there's somebody in the group who is prepared to do that. If for some reason we have a legislator where there's lots of IDA folks and they're not really important on the housing issues, that will be fine with us. Don't feel like you have to talk about things that are outside of your comfort zone, please. Carlos, what would you add?
I think the only piece I would add is that we do have a simplified one-pager of our asks, and if everybody reviews that, as long as you do that piece of it, I think I would ask all the lobby leaders to at least have that one-pager in front of them and to be able to mention those pieces. It's been simplified to the most basic ask that we're trying to get at. And on the IDA side, we need more money, and you need to give us the money that's already in the tax credit on the tax credit side. So it's 2 simple things that we want said that I think all the lobby leaders should be able to take on.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. That's great. So we are going to move now into the housing opportunity asks so that folks know what the Housing Alliance is up to. We have 2 bills that we're going to be talking about with legislators. And again, really want to focus, especially when we have residents of affordable housing or folks who are experiencing homelessness or housing instability. The really important thing that we talk about is the impact of housing stability on people's lives, how it helps their families, themselves, and how housing is really foundational to everything else in people's lives. We no longer have to spend any time convincing legislators that we have a problem with housing in our communities, so that's the good news. The bad news, of course, is that we have a lot of work to do. But we have 2 exciting proposals this session. I'm going to tell you what they are. I'm happy to answer questions. Please don't feel like you need to remember the details. It's all written down. The first one is House Bill 4001. It's a proposal from Speaker Kotek. There's a couple pieces to it. So there's the actual bill, and then there's a package of money requests. The actual bill, House Bill 4001, will remove barriers to siting shelters. So one of the things that we know is emergency shelters are really hard to find places to put them in our communities. And lots of you know this very personally because your communities have thought about where to put shelters in our communities. There's a lot of NIMBYism. There's even in the hearing the other day, theoretically in support of the bill, someone said, well, we don't want to put it next to schools, right? Things like that that are really damaging to us making sure that everybody has a safe place to call home. So the money would remove barriers to siting shelters, and it would include $55 million for shelter capacity and rapid rehousing for the next year and a half. It's a huge amount of money. It would be amazing. We really need the flexibility. And the money is going to really help because Oregon has one of the highest rates of people actually physically sleeping outside compared to other states and communities. The rest of the package includes the reason that we're really excited about it is we know home shelters are a Band-Aid, but we need Band-Aids right now, right? It's not okay for folks to be sleeping outside where they're not safe. But the package includes additional resources that will help us solve the problem. So there's $50 additional million to build more safe, stable, and affordable housing, $20 million to maintain safe, stable, and affordable housing, $5 million to buy land for affordable housing, and then $5 million from some other bills, including youth homelessness. So it's a really comprehensive package. It's very exciting. We're excited for the speaker's leadership on the issue. The second bill that we're talking about is House Bill 4002. It's going to allocate a little bit of money to fund a study of what it would take to provide a state long-term rent assistance program like Section 8. The key points here right now is that federal funding only allows 1 out of every 4 folks who needs a housing choice voucher to actually access that program, because that's how underfunded it is. People wait for years to get Section 8 vouchers. They wait for years to get on the waiting list. It's not okay. So we're going to study a state program and what we could do. So really, both of these asks are really about housing stability. If you have folks in your team who can talk about what it meant to them to access affordable housing or to access that voucher, or what it's been like to wait for the voucher, that's the story that we want to tell legislators. I'm going to pause there and ask if there are any questions about those policy asks. Okay. And I think Luke is showing you what will be in the packet, which is great. Carlos also reminded me one other thing, which led me to think about one other thing on the day of. So while you're not in your actual meetings with legislators, you'll have some downtime. As usual, we have a room in the Capitol where folks can come and sit for snacks. It's going to be a little bit overly full. It always is, but this year it's even smaller than normal. But we're very excited that we actually have a room where people can get snacks and leave their stuff. So there's that. We also have, Raina was going to show you all the reward card. We are doing this again. For those of you who remember, it's a way for folks to win prizes. So we give you some other activities that you can do during the day. While you're in a meeting with your legislator, try to get a photo of the group with the legislator. You can send an additional email. You can watch a committee hearing. There's points on there for just attending the morning training, things like that. And then we'll have prizes at the end of the day. So people will get that in their packets. We'll go through it all on the day, but there will be other things for you to do with your team while you're not in meetings with your legislator. Carlos mentioned for those of you who've only come to IDA days, it is we've done it a little bit different at Housing Alliance, where we do 3 visits. Everybody stays in their same team all day. The reason that we adapted that and have stuck with it is because people feel a little bit calmer. They start to get to know people. The meetings go, they just get a little bit more comfortable when they're with the same people. No, fewer people get lost in the Capitol when they're not leaving their teams. And particularly for folks who've never done this before, like residents and savers, that comfort makes a huge difference. So, all right. Raina, would you like to talk about what we're asking, how we're going to train people to share their story that morning?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the key parts of our advocacy is storytelling. Getting folks with lived experience to take part in this day is how we connect the personal to the policy. So a big part of your job as lobby leaders is to support the folks in your team to tell their story. And when we're doing our trainings, we break it down into 3 parts in order for them to connect their personal lived experience to the issue. So these are the 3 parts. This frame gives people a glimpse into your life. You'll have a chance to practice this in your team. If you're someone with lived experience that wants to connect it to one of the issues that we're asking for that day, we highly encourage you to do so. Or even if you're just there in the room, it's also really important just to support the storytellers. If you're a staffer, there's also scroll down at the top of that page. Sorry. So staff folks can also tell a service provider what they've been able to see as a result of IDA initiative or supportive housing.
Sorry, I don't have it on here.
Okay. And we will have plenty of time that day to practice in our groups. We were going to talk briefly about what that looks like. So the 3-part process, what it was like before, the part that needed to change. An example for that was I was without stable housing and ended up living in my car while trying to go to school and work. The next part of the storytelling is what happened. What was it that changed in your life? I got into supportive housing, and this gave me a chance to get ahead and become an advocate for other people. And also tie in one of our value statements. I believe everyone deserves a safe place to call home. And then the last part of the storytelling is what do we need? When we're walking out of the legislator's office, we don't forget why we were there that day. Please support, a study for statewide rent assistance. Please support that PA initiative. And we practice this way because our meetings are short, and storytellers probably only have about 3 minutes before they're turning it over to the next person. So this is just a way to create that framework so that way we're hitting on our Are there any questions about that? Allison, did I miss anything?
No, that was great. And like I said earlier, we're going to go over all this in the morning and really help people understand what their job is and why they're there and why it's so important that they're there. And then we'll have some time for you all in your teams to really work on this, and we'll be there to help. So, and lots of folks, I will say, particularly in the Portland Metro and Woodburn and some in Eugene, we did a whole series of Levy Day trainings where we gave residents and some savers the chance to practice together and to hear a lot of this content already. And so a lot of the folks who will be coming onto your teams have had this experience already and are prepared. All right, so I think we're gonna check in on, we have like we're trying to be helpful, a do's and don'ts for lobby team leader. Is that okay, Luke?
Yeah, go for it.
Great. And we'll give you this. We have it written down. We're just finishing the editing on it. And it's, intended to be helpful. We think that you'll have lots of time to check in at the church, but it might be also helpful to just huddle with your group before every meeting. If somebody talked too much in the last meeting, you might want to encourage them to step back a little bit. Having even a couple-minute huddle outside of the office can really help ground people back into that space. Obviously, you all don't need this reminder, but we always use honorifics in the Capitol, so we call the representative or senator by their title. We say Senator so-and-so, Representative so-and-so. Even if you know them personally, it's important in this building to use those titles. It's seen as respectful and courteous. And also with their staff, if you're talking about their boss. Keep it simple. Don't get too worried about in the weeds. Just try to make your points clearly and concisely. We have very limited time with legislators. Like we've been talking about all morning, you want to talk about how the bill relates to your community. So how will people in your community be impacted by this policy? Legislators don't often have experiences of not knowing how they're going to pay the rent at the end of the month, right? Or they don't have that experience of needing help saving for a home or a college education. So, and some of them do, and that's awesome because it gives them a different experience. But our job is to share with them that perspective and what it's like. Like we said already, if you don't know the answer, just say you don't know. Legislators will ask you questions that you don't know, and it's totally fine to just say you don't know the answer. Obviously, it's totally
A quick question.
Yeah.
So when we're on this topic, I guess when we're talking to legislators about impacts to our community, and this may sound silly, but should we talk about the positive impacts of having this program whole, or maybe the negative impacts of it not being whole? I guess I don't know which direction to go in, and maybe it depends on the legislator.
I think that's a great question. What I would say, and Carlos, you should feel free to chime in. I think if it were me, what I would say is we know this program has really amazing impacts. It can do X, Y, and Z. If we are not able to get this money, it means we'll have fewer people entering our doors. Carlos, what would you add?
Yeah, I think I would just add that piece that I would start with the positive, and then if you find that the legislator is going negative and asking, because we've had those questions come up. Well, what happens if you don't get the money? Then be prepared to include, well, that would mean X, Y, and Z in my community, or for my program, or for individuals that I serve. So I think have that in your pocket to be able to pull out if you can answer that. And then again, if not, then it's okay to say somebody will get back to you on that.
Cool. Okay, obviously if the legislator asks questions and wants to express their opinion, your job is to be a good listener in that meeting. If you can redirect, value statements are always really good. Redirect whether they agree with you or not. Those, and we'll have, as Luke showed you in the packet, there's a list of both IDA value statements and housing value statements. Those are always really good to get the conversation back on track. It could be something as simple as, at Neighborhood Partnerships, we believe everybody deserves a safe, stable place to call home. It's real hard to argue with and can redirect the conversation. On our don't side, right? Don't go in unprepared. So we have lots of time built into the day for you to get your team prepared and ready. Make sure everybody knows their roles. We already talked about this, but don't be upset if you need to talk to a staff member rather than the legislator. There are lots of things that are outside of our control. We were very clear when we scheduled the meetings that there would be constituents. So it's not, they know that you're coming, and if they're at all available, they will meet with you themselves. Try not to use too many abbreviations or jargon. I know especially the housing folks, myself included, we default into a lot of jargon and a lot of acronyms. Legislators don't know those acronyms, and so just try to use the full program name or be really clear. Hopefully it goes without saying, but don't make negative comments about legislators, opponents, officials. This building right now is real sensitive, so just no election talk, no Donald Trump talk, none of that. It will not help us anywhere. And if legislators make a joke about that, you can just sit quietly or whatever is appropriate in the time, but try not to add on to that. Don't argue. It's really not worth your time. If a legislator feels compelled to argue with you, we're not going to change their minds. So that's a place where a value statement can redirect the conversation and try to get it back on track, or you can switch topics or just say, thank you very much for your time. Obviously, should go without saying, don't raise your voice. Don't be disrespectful to legislators. I don't think we've ever had that happen from a visitor in my time here, but just as a reminder. And if folks are inappropriate for any reason in your groups, please text me or Janet. My cell phone number will be on the packet agenda, and we can put it on the cheat sheet for Lobby Day visitors. I'm not scheduled into any meetings on purpose so that I can come help you troubleshoot. And then lastly, don't take it personally. If legislators are having a bad day or don't agree with you, we do our best. Our job is to show up and talk about why these things matter. There's sometimes things that happen outside of our control. All right, Luke, you want to talk about the packets?
Sure. So let me share. We've already seen some things that are in the packets that everybody will receive. So just to review, so you know what's going to be in there. We'll have an agenda for the day. We'll have the walking route to the Capitol. And again, folks can also opt to take the bus to the Capitol. So there's that option to make sure is available to people. There are the messaging bullet points for IDAs, same with housing. There's going to be the one page that talks about why the IDEA initiative is important and what the solution that we're asking for, as well as the two housing focuses. There's one pages for each of those. Then we have a more full housing opportunity agenda from the Housing Alliance with the Housing Alliance members. the endorsements, and then we have these colorful pictures of how a bill becomes a law. The little looks like a game board with a little chicken coming out of the egg is the bill. That's also fun and cuddly. This one's turned the opposite way, but it tells you a little bit about the difference between a long session and a short session, knowing that we are in just a 35-day session right now. And then the full list of senators and legislators and the map of the Capitol. There's another map, various floors. It can be a very confusing building, as I think all of you know, but your participants might not realize how challenging it is to get around. The other thing is within, so you'll have a packet to leave with your legislator. I think I'm understanding this correct, Allison, you can correct me, but you'll leave something with everybody that you meet with so that they can review more of the details. So, sorry, I need to share a different screen now. Is it sharing the right screen?
I'm looking at a map.
Okay, let me share my other screen here. So this is what is in the packet that'll go to the legislator that you meet with so that they can understand the details, or if it's a staff member, they can effectively communicate. I've got the Housing Alliance information, the IDA information, everybody that's endorsed, and again, a summary of HB 4001 and HB 4002. And then I think we already mentioned this, but everybody will get a bio of the senators and representatives that you're meeting with. As a team leader, that won't be provided for everybody. Allison, what else is being offered to the team leaders that's different than what shown here?
That's a great question. And I would just add, also in the legislator packets, there are the Housing Alliance County Need Sheets, and those are great for housing folks or IDA questions. What it's doing is comparing rents or income to wages, rents to income or wages, sorry. So it's trying to show how far out of reach housing is in our communities, but it also can demonstrate how important it is that folks with low incomes have help saving for assets. On the back of the page for most of the county need sheets, or at the bottom of the page for some of the smaller counties, there is a statistic about home ownership. And for most people in our communities, housing is just really out of reach and we need help. So that will help, I think, if you need data at all to convince the legislator, that is in there for you. In addition, so you're going to have a list of who's on your team. You'll have a list of your visits. You'll have a list of who, like, you're going to visit, as well as their bio, and then you'll have a cheat sheet. And what the cheat sheet is it is the details. Where is each bill that we're asking you to advocate on? What are the, like, nitty-gritty, high-level, like, really important points? So if you have any questions that you think you should be able to answer, that's a great sheet to review. We'll finalize it next week and we'll send it out to all of you so you can see it in advance. We'll try to probably finalize it Wednesday because we'll want it to be as up to date as possible before we give it to you. And then you'll have my cell phone number. You can text or call at any time. We'll be around the building. We'll be wandering around and available to you all. Luke, do we have more questions?
The only question is the same church we met at last year, and the answer is yes, same church. And today is the state of Oregon's birthday. That's exciting. Valentine's Day. It's Oregon's birthday.
It's true story.
Are there any other questions out there?
Hold on, I do have one quick question. Going back to the packets that we're going to leave with the people we're meeting with, I know last year a couple of them, they took the paper, and I know we want to leave it. I know why it's important to leave it, but they kind of balked at it and were like, can we get this in digital form because we're trying to go paperless? Is it standard practice to send it out afterwards or no?
Yes, absolutely. You can bring the packet back and well, my screen is frozen. Can people hear me? Yes. Okay. If they refuse to accept it, there are some offices that do not accept paper. We will gladly email them a copy of what's in the packet.
Great. Are there any other questions? Anything anybody's nervous about?
Holly has a question here.
Holly.
Just wondering about what information should people be sort of keeping track of to bring back? Are there thank you notes? Are there comment, like what needs to be sort of tracked so that when we are done, we have done all the things?
Allison, did you hear all that?
Yes, that's a great. Yes, thank you. Thanks, Holly. I can't believe I forgot to talk about that. So clipped to the packet that you're going to leave your legislator is a visit report form and a thank you card. So the visit report form is really critical. It's where you tell us how the meeting went. It's where you tell us if there were questions. It's where you tell us if legislators are supportive or not. There was a period of time for lobby days where Janet was very task list oriented. If you don't do the visit report form, the visit doesn't count. I won't be quite that harsh, but that's how we know. Lucas just pulled it up. So what questions did they ask? What questions require follow-up? Are they supportive? What concerns do they have? What else should we tell legislators? So we've tried to ask you all of the questions that we think will get at how the visit went, but feel free to add additional information. Also, there's a thank you note. Have your team fill it out, write your names, and you can leave it back with us in 167G, which is where we're hanging out for the day, and then we'll go deliver them. You can also sign it right after the fact. It doesn't matter whether you deliver it to them or we do, but we're happy to.